We're painting quite the summery mountain landscape today using only 4 colors with a little bit of Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleedproof White. It's a very simple approach to a landscape using a limited palette and not as many techniques, just to keep in mind of someone just starting who wants to paint landscapes. As always, I hope you enjoy this video, and all of the materials and everything I'm using will be in the description below. Let's get started. So the first thing we're doing is we're wetting most of our paper using the wet on wet technique and using the wet on dry technique. I'm grabbing cobalt blue here for a bright blue sky, and as you can see, the areas that are white and have a little bit of the dry brush, that's where I skipped using the water. You'll also notice that as I continue adding more paint, that the water and the paint start to blend a bit more, leaving space. I also took Holbein watercolor Gray of Gray at the very bottom here to give a little bit of a grayish blue undertone for some water. It's a very easy way to achieve a soft, watery look. Now taking Daniel Smith Green Gold, which is a very vibrant shade of yellow-green, and it's also very staining. I am sweeping it back and forth. Now the brush that I'm using is an Aqua Elite size 12, and it's a long ground, and I love this brush for laying down a lot of my larger areas of color. I like to sweep back and forth because it just it allows me to build it up. And I should say that I also added over the top of that the Holbein watercolor called Shadow Green. And as always, I feel like I forget, if you like this video, be sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to follow me on my social medias or join our Painting Moodscapes Facebook private group, then be sure to do that at Jackie Peacock Art. Now I just go back and forth and add and build up the color. Now using a small palette knife, I have done this in several videos now, I am creating some rocks. And you can see the rocks are still quite vibrant and a bit neon. And I completely spaced out that this color is very staining. So what I would do next time, unless you like some vibrant rocks, which, it's totally fine. It's a very summery scene, and some rocks are this vibrant. But if you want to avoid that, then I would lay down maybe a bit more of the darker green with a little bit of the green gold or the yellowy green at the top. So some colors are just going to be more vibrant and more staining than others, but not to worry. I still like the scene. It is a vibrant scene, so, it works. So all I do is I make sure that I have enough paint on the paper. The paper and the paint, it's still quite wet, which allows me to make these rocks. And you just kind of drag it and move it around. It's one of those techniques that you'll just have to experiment with. You can do it with a card, but honestly, I don't like using a card. I find the card, I don't know, I feel like I have more control using a palette knife. Now I'm taking a small detail brush by the Graby series or the Graby brush set, and I am adding a bit more of a lighter wash of my Shadow Green and going over the areas of the water and just blending it out, and then also adding darker, more saturated shadow green near the base of the rocks to give it a bit more definition and some shadows. And I really love using this technique. It's a really foolproof way, I think, of achieving some water and some soft reflections. It's very minimal, very easy. I definitely feel that if you're just starting with watercolor, you can do this. Now, the base of my paper, I am adding in some green, and that's just to emphasize a little bit of foreground and some land, and I'm going to add some grass and some, very loose flowers over that. So keeping it real simple. Again, a majority of these painting tutorials are for someone who's just learning watercolor and watercolor landscapes. So if you're really advanced, I might throw in some videos here and there, but those, it takes longer. It seems like from a lot of comments that you guys are just starting. All right, so for my mountain, I switch brushes here, and this is the Princeton Neptune brush. The Neptune brushes I find hold a lot of water. It's a size 6, and I'm using also by Holbein, the Payne's Gray for my mountain. You can use a different color for your mountain if you want. If you want to keep it green, you can use green. If you want to use a bluer mountain, I think a nice shade of indigo. You can mute it down with a little bit of red would be a nice color choice for the distant mountain. And of course, always having a little bit of mist in my watercolor scenes. All I do is just use a little bit of water at the base to blend it out to create the mist. Now I've switched brushes again. I do this all the time. I'm just one of those painters that likes to go back and forth. I wanted this brush to give some distant trees. I did this in my last video. I'm just taking the side of my brush and sweeping up, and this is the shadow green here. And I liked this brush because it has a fine tip, so I'm able to get in the nooks and crannies. But I wanted it to be big enough because I am sweeping the belly of the brush, which is the side of the brush. I'm sweeping it up. And you can use the tip of the brush to create more defined lines for the tip of the trees. It's really up to you. You can have detail trees here, but again, I love doing these type of trees. It's just an emphasis that those are clearly trees in the distance. If you want some texture in your trees, you can splatter on some water, or you can just move the paint around a little bit, which is what I have done. Going back to my Graby brush, this is a size 3 Graby brush. I've taken some more of the Payne's Gray, but a lighter wash here, and I just gradually build it up by using more paint to make it darker, and then I move the paint around with some water. I have a video on how I do these types of mountains. I don't know what it is about this type of mountain that I'm always gravitating towards. I just find it to be such a simple and easy approach to get a textured mountain. There are many, many ways to paint mountains. This is just one way. It's not the right way. It's not the wrong way. It's, like I always say, just a different approach. And I really enjoy it. Now you can see I am fading it out with a little bit of water and just building it up with some more paint, using a bit of the dry brush technique. As you can see, it kind of, the bristles start to spread apart, and then also adding in water to blend it out. And then blending it into the trees. At that point, the mountain was a little bit too wet, so I'm gonna let it dry while I work on the other side of these distant trees. Now, I didn't go back to the larger brush because these trees I wanted to be quite small, so I wouldn't lose the mountain, and then also I didn't want to lose the mist. So you can see here the difference between being able to use the different bellies of the brush to pull that paint up to emphasize trees. It's not as easy, I guess. It's smaller. It's a smaller brush. It's a detailed brush. I love the Graby brushes. They're some of my favorite brushes. They're really inexpensive. And let me know, have you tried the Graby brushes? I have been talking about them for a while, especially for mountains. Now, if you're going to paint really big mountains, then they're not so good. But for these smaller ones, it's great. All right, taking my Deerfoot brush, it's a small Deerfoot brush, I am splattering on some Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White. I love this effect. I know some of you don't. If you don't love it, don't do it. Not a problem. But I really love to emphasize some maybe wildflowers, and I just put it all over the area because maybe it's reflecting in the water, and then maybe there's some splatter on rocks, maybe there's some in the distance behind the rocks. I just love it. It's my thing, and I'm going to continue to do it because it just gives a little something extra to your painting. And you don't have to use white, you can use yellow, or if you want to use another color like purple for some purple flowers, but maybe try experimenting with some gouache. All right, so I did do some lines here, and I did use a script liner brush, which is a thinner, longer brush to create the wispy grasses. And since the mountain has dried a bit more here, I'm able to go back in because it became softer, and I don't want to see too much of that blue from the sky under my mountain, because I want it just to be a bit darker. So that's what I'm doing. I did use quite a few brushes for this landscape. You don't need to do that. I have a lot of brushes. If you're just starting with watercolor and you end up falling in love with it, odds are you're going to become addicted to brushes and you're going to want to get a lot. If you haven't already and you're enjoying my content, be sure to like and subscribe. And again, you can follow on my social media platforms. I'd love to see you there and interact with you. And if you want to receive a newsletter from me once a month, you can be sure to sign up for my newsletter at JackiePeacock.com. And let's see, the last thing that I do here for a little bit of extra something is I take the tip of my deerfoot brush or the side of it, and I just kind of blot on some abstract loose flowers. Maybe, I don't know what these flowers are, maybe they're white lupins. It doesn't matter. It's just giving the impression that there's some flowers here because it's summer and there's lots of wildflowers in my area. So, all right, and of course, the very last thing, the most important thing for all you tape lovers, is to remove the tape and to get a beautiful border. So, I am using an acrylic board here. I know people have asked. It's just a clear acrylic board. I will link it. It is on Amazon, and then it's just some black painter's tape. And that is it. Everyone, I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope it was quite simple. It was very short, and it didn't take me long to do at all. So a really nice way to get some practice in. And if you haven't tried some of these Holbein watercolors, I highly recommend trying them. I have been loving them lately. Normally, I stick to Daniel Smith watercolor paints and more recently, deep light watercolors, but I've also been playing with the Holbein colors. All right, everyone, take care, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.